Hi everyone, welcome to today's creative workshop demonstration with Joanne LaChiusa, a virtual program in this year's M&T Bank Clothesline Online Festival. This festival has been the Memorial Art Gallery's largest fundraiser for more than 60 years, and although we've had to go virtual this year, our goals are still the same. We want to make sure we're highlighting and supporting the arts and our artists, so thank you for joining us today. I just want to mention a few brief housekeeping items before we get started. We do have a live captioner with us today, so if you would like to see captions, you can click the closed captioning CC button at the bottom of your screen. After today's presentation, there will be time to answer questions that you've submitted, and feel free to send questions in during the demonstration, studio tour, and presentation. We can ask them to Joanne and Rachel during their demonstration, and they'll give us answers. So to submit your questions, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as well. And then after today's webinar, your browser should take you to a short survey about your experience. So let us know what you think. Your feedback is super helpful for us. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Joanne LaChiusa is a longtime workshop instructor and uses her experience as a metalsmith and jewelry designer to encourage students to create unique personal jewelry. She combines her knowledge of designing jewelry for mass production and the satisfaction of incorporating symbolism in one-of-a-kind treasures that she offers students the opportunity to stretch their imaginations in a relaxed and enjoyable class. She's traveled around the world representing her designs for manufacturers, and her work can be found in major national and international retailers, catalogs, and collections. Rachael Baldanza is also with us today, and she's been a member of the Creative Workshop administrative team since 2004 and is the curriculum director for the workshop. She works directly with teachers like Joanne to ensure that the Creative Workshop classes are of high quality and are in line with what our students want to learn. Joanne, Rachel, thank you both for being here today. I'm going to pass it to you guys now so you can show us around.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Jewelry Studio and welcome back to the Jewelry Studio for my students who are on a little hiatus right now and are anxious to sign up. Classes are going fine. When you're here, it's great. We have enough space. There's fewer people in the class, which means you get more one-on-one attention, which I know a lot of you like. Anyway, it's still as much fun as it always has been. For those of you who are new to the experience, usually when you come in, you'll get welcome to class. They'll tell you a little bit of instructions, and we have a curriculum depending on the number of classes. So if you're taking a 9-week beginners class, this is what you'd probably be doing: Introduction to School Safety Tools and rule number 1. Those of you who have taken the class before know what rule number 1 is. We will have fabrication techniques: piercing, sawing, filing, sanding. We do textures, stamping, rolling mill, disc cutting, doming, riveting, soldering, making a bezel for a cabochon cut stone, using the flex shaft, buffing and polishing, cuttlebone casting, perhaps wax. If we're taking 9 weeks, we usually have enough time, especially if people are continuing to do some wax pieces. When you come in, beginner class, even if it's a shorter beginner class, what you'll be given to work with is copper, brass, abrasive papers, and saw blades. Now, when you're creating a piece of jewelry, I'd like to have you think of it as a piece of art. You're not necessarily going to find it on the shelf in Macy's. That's not what we're going for. We're going for a piece that is yours. So if you think of a painting or a sculpture, you think of positive and negative area, you think of color combination, copper, brass, silver, you think of polished as opposed to textured areas. You incorporate all of those things, but it's your piece. So if you're going to set a stone, and you will be learning to set a cabochon stone, which is a stone with a flat back and a curved top. And we'll go into that later over there. So if you're going to choose a piece, You could buy, we have cabochons available, very inexpensive, very good prices right here at the gallery. And I would say you choose your stone first, and then that will help you do a drawing. As a beginner, even your first piece, I don't assign a piece of jewelry. So when you come in, if you want to do a set of stone, you may. If you don't want to set a stone in your first piece, you don't have to. And you can decide what your first piece will be. You could do a simple pendant, a ring, a cuff bracelet, earrings, then you're doing 2 pieces of jewelry at once. So let's stick to one. And generally speaking, and those of you who've been here before will know this, sometimes your finished piece will look exactly like your drawing. But sometimes the piece gets the life of its own. And either one is okay. There's no right or wrong. Sometimes it's just, it is what it is. You know what I mean? You'll come out with a piece and you say, this is much more beautiful than my original drawing. That's what we want to hear. All right. So when you, I'm going to give you a quick view here before we move to the bench. And I may as well start with the piece that's on display. I can bring this here. And this, whoops. And this is in the faculty show. The world is watching now more than ever. We have our copper voting booth. We have Vote 2020. And the symbols, I do vote jewelry, but the symbols would be the different types of vote jewelry, rainbow flag, surgical mask, in honor of a couple of doctors I know, voting ballot, Black Lives Matter. So we have, this is symbolism. This is creating a piece. And you don't have to make a piece of jewelry. People have come in and made outlet covers, made anything they want, but it's learning, you're learning the techniques here. You're learning how to use a saw, how to use a drill, look it up more, how to use a saw, how to use a drill, how to solder, and we're using non-ferrous metals. So you learn the qualities of the metal, what makes a metal, how we can exploit the metal. So if you're used to working in ceramics, you have a nice 3-dimensional feel for it. The good news is it doesn't break when you drop it, when you're here. And if you're used to working 2-dimensionally, we're going to push you a little bit further. So you start with a drawing, but then when you start thinking 3-dimensionally, it gets very exciting to create a piece that you could wear or give as a gift. There's always that. Okay, when I talk about a simple pieces, if you look at this simple cuff bracelet, it really is simple. This is copper lined, but you have piercing, sawing, a cabochon stone, and there you go. You're making heirlooms in this room. That's what we do. Okay, when here's another student piece, and this will give you the idea of what I was talking about. She chose the stone first. So if you look at the stone, it's beautiful. But that stone predicted what she used with it. She's got contrasting color, silver, brass, copper. She's got polished, textured. You know, she put a pin finding on it. But this is a very unique piece of art, right? That's really nice. As far as combining, this is combining metals and combining fabrication. When we talk about fabrication and casting, fabrication is when you're sawing, drilling, soldering, and casting could either be done in wax or in cuttlebone, and we'll talk about that. But you can combine the pieces to make whatever you want. We have here a combination of fabrication, just a handmade coil chain, and cast pieces that go together. Now here, then we get to fabrication. When I talk about symbolism, symbolism would be, whoops, just like the vote sculpture. This is a piece I make for the Susan B. Anthony House. And the symbolism in this would be the 3 symbols of the women's right to vote, women's voting. It would be Susan B. Anthony's shawl, the banner that the suffragists wore, and the yellow rose, which meant they were for voting. All right, so that's symbolism. Another type of symbolism. If you think of something as simple as letters, here's 4 versions of just looking at the letters YW for the YWCA. It's going to be tough to look at. YW. All right, so anyway, it's just, you could do a lot of different things just by drawing. And critique. Earrings, these are as simple as just taking metal. These are really like a one-class project because it's taking thinner metal, folding it, texturing it, unfolding it, drilling a hole in it, and you have jacket earrings. Those of you who are familiar have perhaps seen these before. All right. That's it. Now, other things we'll learn in the class would be riveting. So that would be cold connecting metal. Again, those of you who have taken the class before might be very familiar with seeing these guys because it grows and grows. When you're looking at riveting, the important thing to think about with cold connecting is you can have height by using tubing. You could use solid stock. You could use hollow tubing on itself. But anyway, you can create some pretty interesting pieces just with riveting. The advantage of this is you can prepare a piece and then work in your own studio, work at home. So you don't need a soldering tank. You don't need casting or anything like that.
Sort of a Lego version of jewelry.
It's a Lego version of jewelry. All you need is a hammer and a drill.
Yes.
Well, a few more things, but
Yes.
that helps. At some point, we'll talk about cuttlebone casting. So cuttlebone is the backbone of a cuttlefish, and it's rigid on one side and soft on the other side. And the good thing about this is it's very easy to carve into. You can carve into it with your nail. You can carve into it with a toothpick. The advantage of that is this is very ancient technique. They used to duplicate Roman coins with this.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So it's really old. Someone said they watched the beginning of, oh man, what is that movie?
I don't know.
Anyway, Lord of the Rings. And in the first scene, they were casting the ring and cuttlebone.
Oh.
So there you go. That's how old this technique is. All the way old as Hollywood. So the other thing about this is you can poke in prongs and you can create your prongs right there. You could make a bezel, put the bezel in, and then you have a bezel set. So it's fun to play with.
What is a prong?
Oh, prong would be if you have, generally you see them on a faceted stone. So if you're looking at a ring, 4 prongs are holding in the edge, the girdle of a stone.
Okay.
However, you could do prongs like this. Whoop.
Yeah.
And this would be casting cuttlebone where you're just poking into the bone to create the prongs.
Oh.
So then that's a pretty quick project.
Yeah.
That's a quick project. But the other interesting thing is each cuttlebone is like a fingerprint, so that the textures you get and the textures you exploit are gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. And if you pour it upside down, you have to think of upside down and reversed. You can make a simple pendant in one class.
Wow.
And that's pretty interesting too. All right, now.
But usually you said that the casting, like cuttlebone casting, would be one of the last things that happens in the beginning class.
Oh,
like
yes.
the 9th week of 9 weeks.
Oh, yes. And when we do casting, whether it's cuttlebone or lost wax casting, that's really up to you. You could be working on fabrication the whole time, and I'm good with that.
Mhm.
If you choose to do casting, you'll have the opportunity to do it. And you might choose a piece, cast it, and put it away, and sometimes pull castings out months or years later and say, oh, now I can finish this. Now I have time to finish it. So it's good to kind of keep different projects going. Okay, so this type of a simple thing would be really like a one-day demo. So it would be piercing, sawing, making a bezel, making a little wire loop to hold it, but so you could make pendants in one class. But once the people that you buy gifts for know that, they know that. Okay. So, okay, bring it over here.
Okay, let's see. Let's travel a little bit.
Now, around the studio, those of you who have taken the class before know that this is really a well-equipped studio. We have 3 soldering benches. We have more tools than you would ever have in your own studio, most likely. And we have saw frames, hammers, every type of mallet, and ring sizers and everything. So let's say on your first class, you come up with some designs. The first thing we use would be, this is a gauge plate. So this would be when you say, well, what metal? If you have the copper and brass and you choose to buy silver, you say, well, I want it just like this. So this one would be 20 gauge. Okay, so you know how thick the metal is when you purchase it. The next thing you would need is, if you choose to make a ring, we have our friend, the ring sizers. You decide if you're making it for someone else, have them get their finger sized at a jeweler. And just, you could tell them you're coming back, you know. And then, but anyway, you choose your ring size, and on the side of it is marked, there's the size, and that coordinates with the ring mandrel.
Oh.
So when you choose, if you're doing a size 8 ring, we also have little rulers that would tell you how long the piece of metal is going to be that you're going to wrap around to make your size 8 ring. We also use pieces of paper that you wrap around your finger, and then we could know. So we got that. So if you're going to make a piece, and let's say you're going to do a pendant, the first thing is, I usually ask, instead of making one drawing, if you choose a stone, make 5 drawings, 5 completely different pieces. And then we'll talk about each drawing. And sometimes it takes 5 minutes, and kind of narrow it down to what would be the best piece for you to make. Technically, aesthetically, maybe financially, if it's a gigantic,
Right.
if it's a big belt buckle, then you might feel differently about it. But anyway, so we'll kind of narrow it down. And sometimes we'll combine 2 different pieces of your drawings to create the piece that you want to make. When you choose your stone, like I said, your stone, that would help decide what you're going to make. You might get a piece that is you might find a stone that you love, but it's too big for a ring. Mm-hmm. So then you might make it into a cuff, bracelet, or a pendant. Now, another thing is, like this is beautiful. This is a translucent stone. I don't know if you could tell if I put paper behind it. But the nice thing is, when you're making your own jewelry, this is open, you could solder your bezel on, then drill a hole, saw it out so light comes through the back. So you're really taking advantage of all the qualities of the stone that you want. Here. So let's say you have your drawing. The next thing we're going to do is any interior holes or negative space, we would go over. Oh, you could probably do the drill press from here, right? You can see it.
We'll see.
You could turn it. Okay. And a little friendly from the old days for people who haven't seen it. So if I'm going to drill a hole, I'm going to use a starter punch. I'm going to punch this. Okay. And now I know where to drill. But the other things, could you hand me safety glasses in that bin right there?
Yes.
Is that our safety precautions in here always are nose masks, and when you're drilling or using power tools and everything like that, you always wear safety glasses. If you're wearing glasses, it's probably safe enough. Okay, and even in the summer, no open-toed shoes, always closed shoes. From this week on, I don't think it's gonna be an issue until,
No.
until spring. Okay, so now we line this up where we're gonna drill it. If you haven't used a drill before, the 3 jaws you tighten up. Now we'll do this. Okay. Now, what you want to remember is, it's not the strength of you pushing that drill bit down. It's the sharpness of the drill bit. The drill bit is steel, and this is brass, so it's steel compared to non-ferrous. The steel wins. So if you do it too fast, the steel will break. I mean, the drill bit will break. So you want to do it slow and let it do its job. All right, now, so now I would go back because I could put, so before, if I'm going to do this piece, if you do a drawing, you could put tracing paper over it and draw it. You can cut it, you can cut the paper out and glue it to a piece of metal so that you have that. So before I cut the outside of the piece, it's really important to have the largest area to work with because it's easier. So with this, I would do the inside piece. On your piece that your handout, you'll see how to put a saw blade in the saw. And I don't mind explaining over and over. I don't have a hard time with people saying, you showed me already. I don't care. I'll show you again.
I think the biggest casualty in the jewelry studio is the saw blade, right?
Well, if I tell them this way, I'll show you how to do it and you do it. If you break one blade, that's okay.
Right.
But if you break 2 blades in a row, we need a little finding out what's going on. And correct it, because that's just craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And then when you get it, you get everything right. Then you could have a blade that lasts forever.
Right.
Not forever, but close. Okay, so the saw blade, the teeth are pointing down and away from the back. I'm sliding it in here, pushing it against the bench to get enough tension so you hear the right, if this weren't in here, you hear the right sound. Now we always use, here we go. We just put a little wax on the blade.
Oh, I wondered about that.
That's what those are for.
There you go.
So now, working on a bench pin, you just start sawing. But it's important that you keep it straight up and down, vertical. And once you start sawing, when you get 5 people or 3 people in our smaller class, it's like music when you hear people start sawing.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about the Corona requirements is that jewelry classes are now instructor plus 3 students. So those of you who have been itching to come back, please do. We started member registration on Monday, and general registration starts on the 21st.
And those of you who have been in a class with 8 other people will appreciate that there's only 2 other people. So you do all your sawing on the inside piece, and then you carefully bring this back and snap it, take it out, so you have your inside piece sawn out. Then I would saw out the other side. But just to give you an overview of the tools, we have saw frames. Now we have bench pins. So if you're working on the outside of a piece, let's say I wanted to work on this and file it, I could put it in here, put this in the back. Now I've got something more substantial to hold on to. So then, if I'm working on my bench pin, we would do it here. All right. Then you're working on doing it correctly. Part of what you're learning here is not only what the tools are, but how to handle them the most efficient way so that you get the best work. The type of tools we have could be something as simple as a ball peen hammer that maybe you have in your studio or your parents have or whatever. But then it gets a little bit more technical. So you could have hammers that are polished, beautifully polished and domed. You don't use this to strike a tool, and those of you who've taken my class know. Ball peen, but flat, but polished. So there, if you were doing planishing, you get a really highly polished facet. Just by looking at the shape, you can figure out what it will do. But as I always say, before you're going to do something, let's say if you're going to do a stamping or you're going to do something on your piece, grab a piece of scrap and use the tool. So you get an idea how much force you're going to use, which tool you're going to use, and so that you're most comfortable using it. Some tools would be like this, would be beautiful for texturing. So if I have, just use the bottom of this, but by using this tool on the back, I know that sounds so good, but anyway, you get the idea of creating a texture. Now in the handout, one of the things you'll see, the beginning thing is sequence, sequence, sequence. So when you're designing a piece and we talk about it, you know what you're going to start first. If you're sawing out, if you have different components, here I have a textured background and a polished triangle. So the sequence would be, I would saw out the back piece, cut it, texture it, then cut out the little triangle, polish it, and then solder it on. Because once it's soldered on, it would be more difficult to cleanly and accurately put the texture on it. Let's see. The next thing here would be the type. So we have the type of hammers. The next thing would be after you hammer and you start filing. Even if you have a piece similar to this, where you have negative area within the ring, what you would do is, this is soldered because it was a demo, but you would saw out, you drill and saw out this interior negative space. I don't know if I could show it. I guess getting up there. So when you would do that as it was flat, you would not only drill it and saw it, but then you have to go in and file it. You may have a variety of files at home, but here know that we're going from a large, this is a half round, then we have medium, same thing, and we have small, and we have very small. So to have all of these things available is really wonderful. And then it's a thing, the learning process is the best, because as you're learning to use each of these tools, you look at them closely and you say, son of a gun, there's only one cutting side on this and two flat sides. Right. So choosing, and those of you who were in the same family as me know that choosing the right tool for the job is something we always heard from Dad. When you're making a piece and you cut a disc, so, and we have a disc cutter, then you've got a couple things you could do with it. If you texture it, you could turn it into a dome, and the dome would be, you could do a million things with a dome, but rather than sawing out the circle, cutting it as a disc would be great. And then as far as texturing, you could texture it by hand, but we also have a rolling mill, and the rolling mill is what I like to call my metal pasta machine. You put in if you put in a disc and you have it down tight enough, it's just like rolling out dough. You put in a disc and you bring out an oval, okay? And the other thing of sequence would be, if you do a piece just simple enough of just putting wire on, okay, just putting wire on sheet, there's certain things, depends on the technique you're going to do, when you do it flat and then bring it around and solder the back, or when you do something round. But when you're creating a piece, there is, looking for my little copper piece, maybe it's over here. Oh, this guy, okay. And the silver piece. Could you hand me that little silver one?
Which
oh,
one?
The little silver open one, like that, okay. So another thing is, this is your design. So you don't if we're making the ring, we could, the first thing would be bringing it around and soldering the back of the shank, which would mean you would assume that it would be soldered back here. However, this is your ring. You could make it any way you want. So if you decide to do it open, you can do it open. If you decide, I mean, just even something simple like this, pretty simple design. But you could, if you had a disc or if you had your little bezel, you can create sides that come around and go up and have your stone in the middle. It doesn't have to go around and solder in the back. So that's why I would suggest when you come and take the class, when you're excited about it, just sit down and do some sketches of what you'd like to make. And if you do 5 sketches, you might not do those anyway, but it starts the brain, starts you thinking about what would be your treasure, okay, what you would like to do. So also with this one, if you look at it, this is taking a simple piece of straight metal and then of wire, and then with a torch, we heat the end of it and it balls up and goes back. So that gives you that little bit of a texture, of a shape. So after you do sawing, you're choosing the right file, whether you use a half round, a flat, a triangle, the edge, but you're taking away the saw marks and you're putting in file marks. But the saw marks would be the deepest grooves. So when you're doing a file, you're taking that away and you're making it less bumpy. After the files, then we go to abrasive papers. Abrasive papers, this would be 220, which doesn't seem very rough, but you know, if you do 150, 220, and the thing as you're working with abrasive paper is the higher the number you go, the less abrasive it feels. So if you go to 600, it doesn't really feel that coarse. But what you're doing is as you're abrading the metal, you're taking off the top edges. If you think of it as like a mountain range, and first you go in with a file and you're bringing all of that mountain range down a little bit, like it's this, then you do with it more files and then abrasive papers. And what we're doing is making smaller and smaller scratches until we go to buffing and then polishing. When you go to the high polish, all you've done is taken down the surface, right? So as far as sequence, the important part of that is the better you're drawing, if you do a single line instead of a little furry line, if you do a single line, your saw will follow that line, or you make the saw follow that line, so then you have less filing to do. The better your filing is, using the correct file for the edge that you're doing, and you want to keep it perpendicular, then the less abrasive paper you do. So that everything builds on what you've done before. So when you first start working, you want to try to keep the piece as clean as you can, because you don't want to put too many scratches in it, because the only way you're going to get rid of the scratches is by taking the metal down. So you don't want to start out with a nice thick piece and end up with a razor blade of metal, because that doesn't always work for jewelry. We don't want cuts. Let's see. The type of pliers and everything, we've got great tools. Things that nylon jaws. So I could take a nylon jaw and, bend this around, but not mark the metal. And I could straighten it out again. A rawhide mallet. I could use a rawhide mallet if I had this bent and I said, oh, Joanne, why did you do that? When I hit it with the rawhide mallet, which is leather, I'm not marking it. I'm not putting any dents in it. I'm only flattening it out. If I were to hit it with a metal hammer, not only would it make a mark, but if it was polished, you'd get a planish mark, but it's compressing and stretching the metal. If I do steel, copper on a steel anvil, the metal's going to stretch. It's also going to work harden. So sometimes you want a piece work hardened, like if you're making a blade or if you're making something that's really thin, but you want structural integrity, but sometimes you don't. If it gets too work hardened, then we could bring it over to the soldering bench and with heat, anneal it. We bring it up to a temperature and all the molecules relax again. And then it's soft and malleable. And then we can continue working. Now, and some of you are familiar with this, when you do set a stone, setting the stone is the last thing you do on the piece. And it's not until I say, okay, you can set the stone. Because, and there's a little hole in the back. So what you want to make sure of is, because once you set the stone, there's no more adding heat unless you're setting a diamond. You're probably not going to set diamonds on your first course. Maybe, but we'll make the call when we look at your design. But as a demo, so I have this piece, this stone is set, and I put a little hole in the back, see, so the light can come through, you can see that. But now if I want to do anything with it, it's all cold connect. So I could saw this away and then bend it over and make a little pendant, a little tiny pendant. But you could also, if you're sawing a larger piece, then you could saw away, and it all has to do with what your design is. But I could also saw away back here around the edge of this pendant. We're getting almost close to questions. It's pretty good, getting the whole 9 weeks in it. No, not really.
What's the last time
Not
you
really.
taught, right? July?
What, do this?
No, it was last class you taught.
The last class was 2 weeks ago.
Ended in mid-August?
Mid-August, yes, yes. So I miss it like crazy.
Yeah.
So please come and take the class.
Sign up again.
There you go. So here's working flat. I could solder around the base of this stone, and they'll get a different shape. But what I can't do is heat it. So I can't solder a jump ring on it. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention. We talked about different stones and different shaped stones. So even though, let me just get to the end of this and get to my other part of my demo here. Okay. All right. So now if I did the end of this stone, what I would do is I'd take a file that around, make this into a little drop shape, you could see it, and then make a pendant out of it. Now, when we talk about making a bezel, if you have a shape that's unique, it's not necessarily round or oval, you could still make bezels and make that into a pendant. So if you look at a piece like this, it's really gorgeous, this stone. And this stone, if you look at the shape and the color and the design within the stone, it would really help you determine what you're going to use it for. So making a bezel for this stone is a little bit different than making it for an oval. I would start on the top point so that I have my seam in the center down here. Another thing is there's different widths of bezel. So if you're doing a stone and you're going to have it on a ring and you're going to do it in the middle, you could use wide bezel wire so that you could shape the bottom of it to work on your hand. Or if it's a really high stone, you could use that bezel wire. Alrighty, well, it's about 1:45. Whenever you have some questions.
I feel like you just showed us so much in the studio and we're all ready to go for making our own jewelry. I'm ready to sign up.
That's what we want.
Thank you so much for bringing us into the studio shop and showing us around. I have a couple of questions for you just as a jeweler. So how did you get started in jewelry making? How did you find that?
Well, I was an art major at RIT, and then I studied abroad 1 year, my junior year, and it was in Italy, in Florence, Italy. And as you know, Florence, Italy is the seat of the jewelry industry, the fine art jewelry industry. Of course, other cities will argue with that. However, I took jewelry there and I fell in love with it. So when I came back, I didn't have the opportunity to start again as a freshman because it was my senior year of college. So I took industrial environmental design, graduated with that and pursued jewelry on my own with teachers and with friends and with people I respect so much. And I've learned so much. The interesting thing with that is using the industrial environmental design aspect of it, I knew more about mass production, manufacturing, and materials. And so it really helped me. It kind of gave me a unique background. It wasn't strictly a jewelry degree, it wasn't strictly fine arts, but using industrial environmental design and jewelry is where I found my little niche.
That's amazing. I find it so interesting how having such a strong educational background in a very different field, you can pull from that. And like you said, it makes you so much more unique as a jeweler because you have this insight from, you know, I guess you could say training in your college education about something so different.
Right. So it was the fine arts degree. The degree is in fine arts, but anyway. But there's another thing I wanted to make sure that people who haven't taken the class know. One of the most powerful, the best parts of the class is the diversity in the class. That I have people from every walk of life. So I'll have people who haven't taken an art class since high school, and then I'll have someone, let's say, who've worked in a dental office, so they know the tools, they know all the stuff, or dentists, engineers, people who work at a computer all day. Everybody needs their art. And that's what I tell them all the time. So that's the most exciting part, because not everyone's projects look alike, because that would bore me to tears. But everybody bringing in something else to the table, and people, even if they're taking a beginning class, and there are people in the class who have taken the class a few times more, they learn from that. They're watching what they're working on. They're doing a technique that is down the road, but then they see it, they love it, and that's what they incorporate into the next design. So it's really a constant growth.
That's amazing. And I don't know if this is a silly question, it might be the same answer, but how did you also get started in metalworking, and how did you kind of choose that as the type of jewelry that you wanted to be making, as well as your pins and such?
Oh, I guess that was being a design major, that we would use different materials all the time. With industrial design, you're using everything. So you're thinking, if it's different from drawing or painting, because now you're working three-dimensionally. When you work three-dimensionally, you find what you need to create the point you're going to make.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Also a question for you. Do you have a favorite thing that you make?
Well, because I love designing with symbolism, that's probably my best, and that carries over. When I sit down and make wedding rings, or make a ring for someone, or even if it's people say, oh, listen, I've got all these things. I got this from my aunt, this from my grandmother, this from my cousin. They bring stones. Then we talk about, well, what statement do you want to make? And then we won't use this, we'll use this, we'll use it. But creating who they are, what they want to do. Sometimes I do challenges. I mean, I've done challenges, and now thinking this year, all the way back to 9/11. And after 9/11, the students came in and everyone was like bewildered. I said, okay, what do you want? What's your statement? What is your statement? This is the time more than any to say, what do you want incorporated into this piece? And for some people who are working all day long, they want it natural. They want it to look like a flower. They want it to look like a seashore. And that's what they need. Some people want something very tactile that they could touch. Some people want it rigid. If everything is really goofy in their life, if their life is really loose, they bring it in and want structure. If their life is structured, then it's like, okay, explore something else. So, you know, I love designing things for people. I love designing things like for the Susan B. Anthony House. I've always been excited about doing that for women, for accomplishments. For YWCA, just thinking of what they do, taking what people do and trying to make it as a symbol of strength and power for them.
I love that. I mean, you're so right. Jewelry is so symbolic for people, like you mentioned, and is really just an expression of who you are in a physical form.
Right.
You know,
If
so
you think of from the ancient times, when you think of artifacts from all over the world, body ornamentation isn't new, right? Think of
right.
every culture and think of body ornamentation. So that's kind of what we do. We're not coming in, I'm going to make a little pretty ring. Yeah, you could, but I want you to take it a little bit, take it a little bit further, because this is your opportunity to, and that's something you don't get to do usually at home, especially
Right.
with the soldering benches, with the drills, with the buffing and polishing machines,
With the
the
support.
tools
And the support.
and you know, the support, yeah.
And the
Yeah.
education. One of the
It's
neat
exciting.
things is seeing how many people really come into their own in the jewelry studio.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And how the process of making something for yourself and using skills you didn't know you had
Yes,
can really just empower people.
it truly does. It truly does, and that's why I think we get a lot of people repeated. It's not like there's, oh, I don't want to take that class again. I don't make the same damn ring. Well, you don't have to. But you know what I mean? That it is a growth thing, and it's everybody needs their art now more than ever.
Yeah.
You need your art.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I feel like you guys kind of just gave a little bit of an answer to my next question, but what do you
Okay.
love about teaching? I mean, I think that's probably a big favorite. That I think if I were a teacher, that's what I would enjoy most, is just seeing people come alive in this creative,
Yeah.
format for them to express themselves. But what do you love about teaching, and why would you recommend taking a class to get started in jewelry making or metalworking?
Okay. Well, I told you before, it doesn't break as easy as ceramics.
Right. That's a good one.
But we're making heirlooms, so you're usually making something that's going to last longer than you. I mean, I always feel that when I make a piece, whether it's a ring
Right.
or a gift for someone, it's going to last a long time, especially in precious metal. That's why we call them precious metal, right?
Right.
But another thing is the teaching aspect of it. What I love the most is you might get someone in here, like I said, hadn't taken a class since high school, or someone gave them the class as a gift, hint, hint. And then they solder and they turn the torch on. At first they jump, but then they get used to it. And believe me, I'm right there with you. You're not doing anything dangerous or crazy all alone. But when you do that and they light the torch and they have the solder and it flows and they join two pieces of metal forever, unless you heat it again, it's so empowering because they'd never used a torch before. Or some people need to use a hammer. And first they're doing tap, 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 tap. And then later when they're whacking it and they're getting the piece that they wanted to, it's very empowering.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it, is people love doing it.
Yeah.
And then they come back.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you use so many tools that you maybe don't use in your daily life or in your job or anything else like that. I mean, I don't think I've ever used a hammer or a torch to, I know I've never made any jewelry. So yeah, I gotta sign up as soon as we end this webinar. I'm going to be signing up for your class.
There you go. But you know, another thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if I had mentioned it before, about bringing in things that are precious to you.
Mm-hmm.
People have brought in, I had this ring, it was broken, it was, so-and-so, I've had it forever, I love it. You can't necessarily take it apart because it'll break, but you can incorporate it into something else. So we've taken rings and made them independents. We've taken someone who had a precious button, something that meant so much to them, we cold connect it, we rivet it to another piece. You could, if you do, let's say you do tatting, you could do another form, another material, and bring it in and create a frame for it. That's why metal has been kind of for centuries a really important thing to deal with, because of its longevity and because it can cross over. And you know what I mean? You could bring other medium into it to use it and make heirlooms.
Yeah, definitely. Another question for you, and I know we have so many amazing tools and equipment at the workshop, But if somebody were to want to continue making jewelry at home after taking a class with you, is there like a list of equipment or materials that you would be like, you got to have these 5 things?
No, it depends on what they want to make. So sometimes if people want to work at home, we'll say, like, what kind of budget, what kind of area you have to work in. These would be the simple things. And you can go to Dan's Crafts and pick up a saw frame and saw blades. You could get hammers. Some hammers they have. Some people will create the jewelry based on what they have in their house. So if they tell me what they have, then this is what you could aim for. There are certainly jewelry suppliers and things to get equipment, and there's different levels of it. So you could do really simple fabrication. You could do a combination of beading and a little, we don't do beading here, but you could do some things and create your own simple pieces. Some people create unique findings here and then go home and do the other things, do the beading and put it together and sell it. That's great. So yeah, there's always something for somebody. We could always work on steps of what they would need to buy to do what they could do, or design a piece around what they have already.
That's great. And my last question for you before we start to wrap things up, but is there anything that you're working on currently as an artist? Any big projects that you have in the works?
Well, I just finished wedding rings. I've got other wedding rings in case they're watching that I'm working on. I just did a knife. I just did a knife for, but it's all with symbolism. So the handle was casting cuttlebone in 2 pieces, but fabrication and casting. I like doing that. I'm also doing the Vote 2020. So the Vote 2020 awesome. Pieces, which are available in the art gallery right now in the jewelry store. And there's necklaces and bracelets, and depends on sometimes commission, sometimes I'll just do pieces on my own.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Joanne and Rachel, thank you both so much for bringing us into the jewelry studio at the Creative Workshop, letting us watch and learn about all the tools we have available, the great instructors we have. It's been a real pleasure listening to you guys just talk about the classes and what we have at the studio. I mean, you guys are way too much fun to watch. I must say. So thank you again for taking the time. It was really great. I'm gonna share my screen real quick so that our viewers can see where they can sign up for a class in the Creative Workshop. Okay. And like Rachel mentioned, our classes you can sign up if you're a member, and you can sign up, is it next week if you're not a member?
Yes.
And Joanne will be offering 2 classes this fall in the Creative Workshop. One is beginning jewelry, so you can learn some of the basics that she reviewed today in the workshop. And then it looks like she's also going to be teaching a continuing jewelry class for more advanced jewelry students. And like Joanne said, if you've taken a class with her already, you know that there's just tons of stuff still to do with her. So be sure to go to the Creative Workshop website if you'd like to sign up. And we'd also like to encourage you to check out our Clothesline event hub at clothesline.rochester.edu. We have lots of events throughout the rest of the week, and we'd love to see you there. You can also purchase your Clothesline t-shirt at our event hub. You can make a donation. The M&T Bank is doing a 1-to-1 matching challenge. We also are offering our traditional Clothesline $15 off membership, so you can purchase a membership, renew your membership, or give a gift membership, all at the reduced price of $15 for each of those levels. And that's just in time for our season of Warhol exhibitions, which will be opening in October. So it's a great time to become or renew your membership. And we also will be offering a recording of today's webinar. So if you'd like to watch again, or if you know anybody who was unable to make it today, that will be available soon. So thank you all for joining us. Joanne and Rachel, thank you again for your wonderful demonstration, everything that you did for us today. It was great to have you with us.
Great. I'll look forward to seeing you in class.
Yes, I'll see you in class in October. Bye. Bye, everyone.